Hello and welcome to Erich McElroy's American Exchange. I'm Erich McElroy, and this is my exchange. That sounds really cheesy. I don't know if I'm going to keep that, but it is, I suppose. This is me dialing across the pond from England to America to find out what is happening in my home country. I've been living over here for 23 and a half years, but still keenly aware of my US citizenshipness and interested in what is going on, especially in the run up to the 2024 election and with the state of American politics as they are constantly getting worse and worse. We talk to all kinds of people across the political spectrum, politicians, reporters, columnists, contributors, such as this week, where we welcome back S.E. Cupp. She's a political contributor with CNN. She is an author. She's also a columnist for the New York Daily News, which, if you're in the UK, they are not available in the UK. So if you jump over to the Chicago Sun-Times, you can see her columns there because they are comfortable with GDPR, apparently, which is our privacy laws here in the UK and Europe. And unfortunately, some American publications don't want to be published with those. But Essie's always great to have on the guest as a guest because she is still calling herself a Republican, and that's where we start the discussion to see where she's at, but not a Trump Republican. But she wants to stay with the party. She wants to see the party be reborn, I suppose, is a good way to look at it, or at least survive this current existential crisis, which she knows that it's in. So she still holds on to her conservative principles and has them and is happy to have that debate. But she knows that Trump is not the answer to those problems. So we talk a lot about where things are with the state of the primary and the fact that it is not over in the battle between Trump and Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina. And we spent a lot of time talking about why Republicans bend the knee or kiss the ring or other strong things that you could say that they do to appease the Donald. We also had a fun conversation about Glenn Beck, who Essie used to work for. And for those people who don't know Glenn Beck, he was Tucker Carlson before Tucker Carlson was Tucker Carlson. He was the original sort of far right big star on Fox News. And at one point, Essie worked for him. And Glenn, like many others, tried to dabble outside of the Trump camp, but has been pulled back into the fold. And we discuss why that happens. So, as always, it's a fascinating conversation. And it's at the end, so I'm not going to give it away. I do ask her what she thinks would happen if it was Trump v. Biden and the election was held today. And for those of you that are liberal like I am, I don't think you'll be very encouraged by what she had to say. So thank you very much for listening. Keep an eye out. We'll be back every week. Make sure to subscribe and all that. Check out S.E. Cupp online. Check out her website. Follow her on Twitter. She's a great follow there. And please enjoy S.E. Cupp. Well, I'm very excited to talk once again to one of our favorite guests on the podcast, S.E. Cupp. It's great to see you again. It's a new year. It's 2024. It's election. You have in the past, and I haven't got an update yet, so I need to know because you've been a Republican all your good life, and are you still identifying as such in the current Republican cult party? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, I don't know. I certainly don't identify with this Republican Party. I don't recognize it. They wouldn't identify with me either. I'm considered an apostate. So no, but I haven't switched my party affiliation. I'm certainly not a Democrat.
Yeah.
I'll vote, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden if Trump is the nominee again. But like locally, I still vote Republican because my Republican local lawmakers are sane, normal
Yeah.
people.
Okay.
So I always identify as a conservative, so that
Yeah.
doesn't change. But I mean, no, I don't know today's Republicans. Who does? Who does?
Hmm. But you're interacting with a lot more of us Democrats these days than I would imagine you did back in your heyday.
No, they're interacting more
So,
with me, Erich. That's what's happening. When I was so I started at Fox News, which you may know is a
I've
right-leaning.
I've heard of it.
You probably know the guy at the top. And when I was there, I got lots of hate mail from the left, death threats like from the left.
Oh
Then I
my
moved
God.
to MSNBC, which is a left-leaning network, and I was the
Yep.
token conservative, but like welcomed as the token conservative.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of got hate mail from both sides
Okay.
because here I was, a conservative on a left-leaning network, and now that I'm at CNN and Trump happened, my only friends are liberals. Like the only people who like me are on the left now. And of course, like the never Trump community.
Yeah.
So, but the funny thing is, Erich, I have not changed at all what I believe. Everything kind of has changed around me. So
Okay.
it's a very disorienting, weird place and time to be. I feel like I'm on an island.
That's because I mean, because if you listen to a lot of Republicans, that they worry that, being around liberal people like myself, that it's kind of like cooties in the playground, that, like wokeness will start to rub off on you, and you'll start to, do all the things, insist on, having genderized your book. I don't know what I don't know what it means, but it's apparently it scares a lot of people. So, but you
Well,
managed to hold on.
listen, I grew up in liberal Boston. I went to liberal universities, two of them. I work in journalism. I worked in liberal Manhattan. I mean, I'm surrounded by liberals and have been for my entire life. If I didn't want to be around liberals, I would have had to change lives.
Yeah.
So I've never looked at it in those kind of terms. I can be friends with anyone, and I have really loved working with my liberal colleagues at CNN and MSNBC, Van Jones and David Axelrod, folks that are really,
Mm,
really close with me now. And we make our arguments stronger.
yeah.
Listening to someone on the left um, makes me have to be better at my arguments.
Mm,
And in fact, sometimes they win me over and vice versa. So I love that exchange of
yeah.
ideas. And I've never been afraid to be around people who saw things different than me. What a weird way to see the world if you just wanted to see yourself reflected back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but there's people on the left and right who both want that. They want to be in
Yeah.
there. They embrace this bubble culture that we've now found ourselves in. And
Yes.
the younger generations don't know anything but that.
Mm.
They've never been in a place where you had sort of a neutral basis to start from and then work towards the middle naturally. Now it's two camps, which is terrifying. But
Yeah.
um well, that's good because I know because I talk with Joe Walsh as well, who was a Tea Party Republican, and
Yeah.
he's actually admitted he's gotten a bit woke, and I think it's I think it scares him. It's incredible to see
We may
because he
talk
was pretty
about
far out.
this.
He was pretty far out there with the Tea Party
And
stuff.
he was
I
more
mean,
conservative than I am, and now he's
yeah.
a bit more liberal than I am. Again, I have not changed, Erich. Um, but
But
he
the
and I
party sure
talk a lot.
has. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
with Joe. Yeah,
And
he's great.
because he kind of was flirting with leaving the party and um is much more on board with like, well, now I have to vote for Democrats because the
Mm,
party's so bad. And I'm not completely there. Like I said, I'll vote for Joe Biden again if Trump is the nominee, but my principles are still the same. And I'm
mm.
not going to let some orange lunatic drive me out of a party I really loved and principles I still stick to. He abandoned completely because he didn't care about them. So, I mean, Joe and I just have a kind of a different approach,
Mm.
but but we have the same feelings about the Republican Party 100%. We feel like it left us, like it's completely corrupted. It's the party of Trump, and it's going to be a long time. We talk about this too. How long is it going to take before the Republican Party looks normal again or can win a new generation and new kinds of voters
Yeah.
outside of the MAGA cult? I think it's going to be a really long time.
It feels like it, and that brings us naturally into talking about the primaries, which we're at right now. They might be over, they might not be over, depending on how
They're
far
not
people
over.
lean in. They lean into well, the Republican National is it committee is tried to end it this week by by saying, well, forget the fact that we've only had two primaries or one caucus and one primary. We just want to say Trump has won and ignore the
Mhm.
fact that there is still someone running, and the guy who's in the lead has four criminal indictments against them. Well, they're ignoring
And
that anyway.
48
But
states have not voted yet. That's
yeah,
the important part. 48 states have not voted yet. So for the RNC, and really this is a guy named Dave Bossie, who's like a total Trump sycophant. I used to know him pretty well too. I think trying to suck up to Trump with
and
like
the
some
RNC
idea,
just
like, I know
for
what we'll do.
so the RNC their role in this because I mean I think I have an idea. So are they the party or are they just a committee within the party or what? How powerful is the RNC?
Yeah, they're the party. That's the party. So
Okay.
the RNC generally stays neutral in a Republican primary and
Okay.
then will back the nominee eventually. This year, they are clearly with Trump. They've already picked sides.
Yeah.
And this ham fisted idea to essentially rig the election for Donald Trump before 48 states have voted
Hmm.
um, was shocking. And luckily, a lot of Republicans inside the party revolted and said, no, no,
Okay.
no, 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 this is a terrible idea. And in fact, it was so almost unanimous that Trump had to come out and say, yeah, let's not do that, even though he loved this idea. Um, let's not do that. I want this election to be fair and I want to win it the
Hmm.
right way. Right. He would have completely gone along with this had there not been an internal revolt at the idea of calling an election before 48 states have voted. I can't say that enough.
Yeah.
That's a real serious thing here. Every, federalism, every state wants its vote. They want their
Yeah.
primary day. They want it to count. And if the Republican Party is already to decide, well, we're going to say that Trump's the nominee, then that I think was sort of horrifying to a lot of voters.
But I mean, it's not surprising in the Trump Republican Party, and I would argue it's not surprising in a lot of the things that happens in the traditional Republican Party because of a great deal of voter disenfranchisement that gets done across the board. And I know there's a bit of both sides on that, but the Republican Party in
Yeah.
particular is known for, especially in places like Georgia, trying to disenfranchise voters and change the rules of the game. I mean, the whole idea of having to have a second vote in an election if you don't reach a 50% threshold, that comes out of trying to prevent the black vote uniting with poor white votes back in the day. So the Republican Party, unfortunately, in its modern iteration, is very anti-democratic, with this not in a small d.
Um, I think it's more than a little both sides. Democrats, especially recently, have gotten real good at gerrymandering and redlining and changing districts so that they're more favorable for
But
Democrats. So,
but
I mean,
that's within using existing rules, which I don't agree with. I think
well, no, no,
it
no,
should be
they're
done.
changing rules. They're changing
Yeah,
rules. They've changed rules many times. And listen, they're reacting to Republicans doing the same.
yeah,
But I think there's been an abandonment of small d democracy across the board. And look, we can go back in history. Dixie Democrats had a
yeah.
hand in what you're talking about too. So, you know, we can certainly chart the history of this, and there are lots
Mm,
of books on that. But the important thing, I think, is that today, whatever Republicans do, Democrats seem to match them. Like, if they're going to go low, we'll go low too. And that's awful.
yeah,
Democrats should be better than Republicans and let Republicans keep making these anti-democratic mistakes because
right.
eventually it will um, result in the end of the party,
Yeah.
which is, not something anyone should want, right? We should want two strong parties in
Mm,
this country. And I think we have two very weak parties. The Republican Party is certainly weaker than the other, but I don't think the Democratic Party is very strong now either. They're still
well,
putting up their 80-something-year-old geriatric guy who,
well,
again, nice guy. I will vote for him, but I
yeah.
cannot believe the lack of imagination on the left. I cannot believe it.
No, but I think that's a side issue. I think the issue of attacking the fundamentals of the voting process, which Trump's party is doing, it's not surprising the RNC is happy to do away with elections because Trump was happy to do away with an election. So I think
But
that's a much
ultimately, but
higher thing than tweaking some gerrymandering on the side in
but
a rival.
ultimately, this idea lasted a couple of hours, and they're
Yeah.
not doing it. Ultimately, there was luckily some sanity
Mm,
inside the RNC, inside the Republican Party. This wasn't shut down by Democrats. It was shut down by Republicans who said, no, that is not a good idea. Dave Bossie and Donald Trump, that's a terrible idea. And it was so um, swift and kind of overwhelming that even Trump walked it back. That's, I think, the good news, that there are checks and balances still, and there are some sane heads
yeah.
left in this party to revolt against that truly awful idea.
I like a phrase that it was so bad even Trump walked it back. That is
Well,
a
that's when you
high
know.
level
That's
of
when you
bad.
know how bad it
That is a
is.
bad idea. Um, So it's a two-person race now between Trump and Nikki Haley. I mean, the
Yes.
important question, obviously, in that is, what did you think of the outfit that she wore after she came after her the New Hampshire primary? I mean, how weird was Trump's attack? So he normally in American politics, for those people who don't follow it, at the primaries, and Trump did this in Iowa. You win the primary, you thank your opponents, and you do a speech about going forward in the future. And Trump kind of did that in Iowa, and then the other people either drop out and endorse someone, or make it a speech will fight on. Nikki Haley did that. She thanked Trump. She congratulated Trump on his victory in New Hampshire, acknowledged it, and talked about the future and said she's in for the fight because her home state is next. She's got a whole month of momentum. Blah 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 blah. She's still got some big money backers. It seems like Trump lost his shit.
Yeah.
What did you think of his speech?
Well, for those of us who know Trump, and I know him personally, this is not
Mm,
surprising. Women who don't, love him really get under his skin. That
yeah.
really bothers him. I mean, we see him swing at men too, obviously, like
Mm,
no one's spared, but he goes for the jugular when women sort of betray him. And,
yeah.
he's done it to me. He's done it to any woman. Carly Fiorina was a woman running in
Oh yeah.
2016, and he
Hmm.
made fun of her face. I mean,
Yeah.
he really goes to these grotesque places with women. There was a host at Fox back in 2016 named Megyn Kelly, and he made a joke about menstruating with her. Like he goes for women in a very sexualized, misogynistic way, and
Yeah.
so knocking Nikki Haley's clothing is sort of the least I expected from him, because that's how
Mm,
gross he is and how insecure he is. And he is so pissed at her for running, for doing well. She's getting 40+% of the Republican vote.
yeah.
That means the party is not coalesced around Trump, despite what he says. That means the party is
Mm,
very divided. And there are buyers for Nikki Haley's brand of conservatism. That really pisses him off. And even if he wins, which ultimately he's likely to win, he knows that she is making him a weaker candidate. Every single
mm.
primary that she gets any votes and gets to get up on stage and say, we're going ahead, this makes him a weaker candidate. And he hates that.
And I mean, the thing is, normally we all, any side you're on in a political party, you want the party to unite after a thing like a primary. That's the idea of doing these things. I mean, famously, Barack Obama, brought Hillary Clinton into his administration, gave her a very powerful job as Secretary of State. Joe Biden ran against Obama and other people. So that's what you do. But Trump seems to relish this concept of that they come to kiss the ring. They all come to bend the knee after he insults them. I mean, the examples are ridiculous, and then he humiliates them once they like Joe Biden
Yes.
and Donald and Obama. They didn't. Obama never humiliated Hillary Clinton. If anything, I think he helped resurrect her legacy. Not,
Yes.
I mean, not obviously not that she needed his help, but I think it was a very good
No, she
way
did.
out for
She
her.
definitely did. And
Yeah,
yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah.
it
No, I
sounds
think
kind
you're
of
absolutely
misogynistic maybe to
right.
say that like that, but I mean, for all the like, bringing Biden in, that's what we normally do. But we didn't. Obama didn't humiliate Biden. None of the George W. Bush didn't humiliate.
No
They
one,
him
no,
and
this is very unique to
yeah.
Trump.
So
And
it's
it's
but it's
this like
sickening.
ritual humiliation.
Yeah.
And by now, everyone knows what they're in for. So you'd think they would eschew this, and yet they are so game for what they know is coming, right? Tim Scott was a Republican running very briefly in the primary. He didn't go very far. He knew when he ran
Mm,
that Trump was going to come for him, and he knew when he quit he was going to have to go and suck up to Trump, and that it was going to be ugly, and it was ugly. I mean, Trump made a joke about his being generous about his bachelor status, being
yep.
more realistic about gay rumors floating around
Hmm.
about Tim Scott, just of course to his face. He made
Yeah.
it at a rally to his face. And Tim Scott gets up on stage and says, oh, I just love you. It is so emasculating and pathetic and gross to watch. I don't understand how or why these men who are humiliated by Donald Trump
Hmm.
then throw themselves at him for his praise and very temporary affection.
It feels like this week seeing them do it in rapid succession because, Ron DeSantis, after being, ridiculously attacked by Trump for months and months and months, turn around and endorse him. And after saying he wouldn't, after he made a comment, Ron DeSantis was belittling people for quote unquote bending the knee just a few weeks ago, and then poof, did it.
Yep.
But it feels like there's a hollowness to it this time around. And again, I'm watching this thousands of miles away, where they kind of know they're doing it, even though it is bullshit. And no one, like, it feels like it's even less, can't think of the right word that I'm trying to come up. Like they just know even more that it's just, it's, what's the word I'm
And
looking for? They less of it's more of a facade now than it ever was that where they're supporting him without really supporting him, that everyone knows it's fake.
well, I think there's no way not to, right? We've been here
Yeah.
before. We saw this with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Rand Paul in 2016, guys that were viciously attacked by Trump. They
Yep.
attacked him too, and then they
Mm,
all ended up endorsing him.
yeah.
So we've seen this, and so it does look very disingenuous. It looks really sort of canned and packaged and just like the thing you have to do. So I don't know how anyone respects these people once they've
Mm.
done this, because it's so humiliating, and it's again, it's just so pathetic. You
But do you
don't
think
have
that,
to do it. You will live
yeah,
without Donald Trump, but
there
they're
must be a
so
way to
afraid.
exit
Yeah.
without it. But is the base, because obviously they want to keep the base on side. These people are terrified of being primaried or whatever. So do
Yes.
they think that the base is looking at Vivek, or, well, Vivek was kind of always in Trump's camp anyway. But like Ron DeSantis, like, well, now Ron has finally come, he's back. And when, yeah, and so the base is going to respect that demasculation when it's an alpha
Well,
male party kind of thing that Trump alleges to
uh,
have, or whatever the hell it
oh,
is.
well, don't ask me to get inside the minds of the MAGA people, but once Trump says, okay, he's back, then the base accepts that. So,
Yeah.
the base very briefly turned on Vivek because Trump said Vivek is fake. Now they're back with Vivek. Vivek is fine
Yeah.
because Trump says now he's fine, he's back with us. So, I mean, it's so cultish that whatever Jim Jones says is basically what, the MAGA base will do.
Yeah.
And we know how that ended. It ended badly for
Mm.
Jonestown, but it's not going well for MAGA either. I mean, hundreds of them were sent to prison
Yeah.
for, running into the Capitol based on Trump's lies. Many of them have parted with hundreds of thousands of dollars with the intent of, quote, stopping the steal. It's all gone to line Trump's pockets. He's
Yeah.
stealing from his own voters. I mean, it's not just, it doesn't have to be as bad as Jonestown to be awful.
Mm. Oh,
Here in Magaland, it is a cult, and it is brainwashing people, and it is ruining lives.
yeah. I mean, it puts so many things at risk. You get, the list goes on and on. But this bending the knee ritual, because you've seen it, people in media doing it as well. So you've stuck to your guns. Chris Christie's finally, he woke up and saw the light. He seems to be sticking to his guns. Um, I want to talk about Nikki Haley in a second, but one person I did want to ask about is kind of a little bit of a side story. Somebody that you worked with, who I've long been fascinated with, who did bend the knee as well, and that's Glenn Beck.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's someone who, I would imagine people in the UK don't know Glenn Beck because it's going back now a few years. Because it was was it Obama's era that he was on Fox News, and he was the far right person on Fox News. That was his high water point, very much against Obama, and had some interesting ideas. He initially was an anti-Trumper, and then he realized he was losing his base and came back and now supports Trump. Um, but you have some insight because he was always, I mean, on the left he was a little bit, seemed a little bit goofy, Glenn, but you worked with him. So I wanted to ask you about that, and then why you think someone like him has also now bent the knee to the person like Trump.
Glenn is fascinating. And yeah, I worked with him. So he was at his height. He was at Fox, and he cultivated a brand. I don't know if you remember this, but he would always have like a blackboard behind
Yeah.
him, and he would kind
Oh
of
yeah.
memorably, chart out based on like history lessons and old books that he found. And it was kind of a new way of talking about politics that was not just the horse race
Mm.
that cable news was used to. And like memorably, he would cry a
It's very
lot.
emotional. Yeah.
So it was like an emotional connection with audiences, and he built a huge audience. And then
Mm.
he was so big that he left and he went to form his own media company. And I was offered a job there and I wanted a job. So I went in and I was his first talent hire.
Okay.
And I had my own little show there. And what was great about working there was I got to experiment and kind of figure out how to do what I do.
Mm.
Um, not on the big platform on like Fox News primetime, but at
Yeah.
this startup essentially. And I had several shows and I kind of grew a little bit there. And I was only there like 2 or 3 years, but so personally, it was good for me. But um, we did not see the world in the same way a lot. And that was fine with him.
Okay.
To his credit, he would hire people that did not agree with him
Mm.
completely. So I got to be me and he got to be him. But um I watched him change a lot based on like, were we getting an audience? Were we,
Mm.
was he still rating? Once you're out of like the cable news ecosystem and Jon Stewart's no longer mentioning you every day, you
Yeah.
can feel, I think he felt isolated and like, well, I've lost my public
Mm.
power. And he still has, I mean, he has a lot of fans and he still had a rabid fan base and probably still does. I don't see him much anymore,
Yeah.
but I watched him change a lot and I thought, well, what are we doing? I thought the whole point of you
Mm.
was that you were this convicted, completely kind of impenetrable principled person. And I don't think that's completely true. I think Glenn at his core is a performer,
Right.
and performers perform. And, he's not alone by any means, but there was some weirdness. Speaking of Jonestown, there was some weirdness working there, like staff-wide juice cleanses.
Okay. Because
Um,
he'd had some health scares, hadn't he? So I mean, he'd had a few. I can't remember if it was cancer or what
sure,
was.
but I didn't. I hadn't. Why must I have this juice cleanse? And I did not, but and he told us all to keep diaries because one day you're going to want to write about what we've done here. And he would talk
Okay.
about he moved to Texas, left New York, and said, because I want to be able to walk down the street and have people run up and hug me.
Hmm.
There was some weirdness there for
Yeah.
me, that was a bit of a turnoff. And listen,
Mm.
Glenn was always very kind to me,
Yeah.
and I think he's a decent person, but that kind of environment was not what I signed up for and not what I wanted to like be a part of long term.
Yeah. I think now thinking back about all the chalkboards and the theories and the madness,
Yes.
it seems to me like he encapsulated what we now see as sort of normal conspiracy theory-esque energy that comes from like the flat earthers and the COVID deniers and all that stuff. He was doing it before it was everybody was doing it. Is that a fair
Yeah, but he
reflection on his
made it
time?
sound um he went back to like academic
Yeah.
sources and he made it sound um intellectually rigorous. It didn't sound like crackpot stuff. But at its core, there were a bunch of conspiracy theories in there for sure. And
Yeah.
now he does a ton of those.
Yeah.
When I do see a headline pop up for Glenn, it's usually some crazy conspiracy theory. But yeah, I think he dressed up conspiracy theories with things that looked and sounded, serious.
Yeah. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, SE was just doing a hand gesture, which reminded me of Glenn, with sort of this waving armed. It was incredible because Jon Stewart did send him up a lot with the chalkboard and all that stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Jon Stewart's coming back, thank God, to the Daily Show. Um, it's just incredible. But it was, yeah, it was an amazing, but it looked like madness. But you think that, so you think that the core, and I guess we've seen it now with the modern, then it became Bill O'Reilly on Fox, and then it became Tucker Carlson on Fox, and all these guys that they just get, because it's a self-fulfilling loop thing where the crazier you get, the more attention you get, so you have to go crazier, and was he in that, or would you think he genuinely believed a lot of that stuff?
I think, and Tucker's a really interesting comparison because I know him too. He gave me my first job.
Don't you know, Essie?
Well, listen, I've been doing this a long time, and it's
Yeah. No, it's
a
great. That's
small
why I love
world. But
talking to you, because it's not many times that you can have someone in the same conversation as Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump. So
I mean,
that's
there's no
pretty
one you've
cool.
named in this podcast that I don't know so far.
Yeah,
Everyone you've named and everyone I've named are people I know, but maybe we'll get
crazy.
there. But I think Glenn did believe a lot of what he said
Okay.
at one point. And maybe that's just his own power of persuasion that he
Mm,
made himself believe it. Tucker is, like Glenn, a performer.
yeah.
I don't think he believes it at all. Tucker's very smart, very smart. And I
Mm,
lament that he isn't channeling that intellect for good. Um, but I don't think Tucker believes anything he's saying, because I know him.
wow.
I know him really well. And I know what he believes because when we were at the Daily Caller, which he founded, another upstart,
Mm,
you know, I got real familiar with what Tucker believed because Tucker wrote a lot and we talked a lot. And, he comes from like the Buckley school of conservatism, and he
mm,
doesn't he doesn't like Donald Trump. I mean, he can't stand Donald Trump, but he performs for an audience that, like you said, at Fox, it becomes this loop, and you have to keep fulfilling the promise
yeah.
of anger, grievance, fear. You have to keep fulfilling that. If you step away from that at all, you're betraying the audience and their purpose for being there. They're there
Yeah.
to get angry, and they're there to be told that their grievances are true. And by the way, here are some other ones that you might not even know about.
Yeah.
That's what they're there
It's
for.
and I guess for Glenn, because in 2016 he didn't support Trump, and then he came back into the fold. And now I did look at his Twitter feed earlier today just to get a sense of what he's talking about. And he's all on the Texas. I guess he's in Texas, so he's all on the Texas border wall, and Texas should rise up against the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court just stepped in and sided with the federal government because the federal government's in charge of our borders, as they should be. So
Right.
he's obviously in that. But that's where because I guess that's where the audience is, because I suppose people like me aren't going to listen to Glenn Beck and who remember him,
Nor
and he's
me.
not
And
going to
I,
be
yeah,
speaking he's not speaking to a normal the classic Republican, is he? Which is what I guess I would put you in.
no. And it's this very weird, the project used to be in media to grow audiences.
Mhm.
And the project now is to really condense an audience.
Yeah,
So you're growing it, but you're actively pushing some people out because you don't
yeah,
want them. And so Glenn's audience is very Glenn centric. And I don't even know it anymore because I haven't checked in with, what he's doing in a long time. But I assume, I can guess that it's very Glenn centric, and he's giving them exactly
yeah,
what they want, and he has conditioned them to want. And Tucker, while he got a huge audience at Fox, he also pushed out a lot of other people, right? People
yeah,
who didn't want conspiracy theories and who wanted more classical conservatism. He grew an audience that was just there for Tucker.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that project has happened across the landscape of cable news over the past 10, 15 years or so. And I don't think that's great. I think that's a pretty corrosive development.
I think it is. Yeah. Well, it all goes back to the time that Jon Stewart was it Crossfire? And
Yeah.
if anybody out there has not seen that clip, it's still on YouTube, where Jon Stewart just eviscerated both Tucker Carlson and whoever, I can't remember who was on the left,
Mhm.
but and just said this is bad for America, this is bad for democracy, and it's only no one listened to Jon Stewart, and it just got worse.
Well, and
But
that was the death of Crossfire,
yeah,
original iteration. And then CNN in 2013 decided to bring Crossfire back,
mm.
and I was the host, which is so wild.
Of
So
course,
wild, but like
wow,
I know everybody because I've had so many lives in this business. But yeah, it was very weird for Tucker to give me my first job, and he basically is why Crossfire ended, that
yeah,
that moment. Just
mm.
couldn't survive that humiliation. And then I kind of resurrect Crossfire briefly. Bizarre, wild.
Yeah. But on your under your version of it, it wasn't quite, was it as gladiatorial as it was back then, or I can't.
No, no, it was much more it was civil, but listen, we argued, and
Yeah.
the best part of Crossfire, I think, the hallmark of Crossfire was we were prepared
Mm,
for our guests, and
yeah.
we had more questions than we had time for, but we were going to put them on the hot seat.
Mm,
And you had a left right person and usually a left right guest, two
right.
guests. And I was going to put one guy on the hot seat, and the guy on left was going to put the other guy on the hot seat, and we were going to try and shake them out of their talking points.
Mm,
And that was really fun.
yeah.
It was hard because, again, you had to be real prepared. But ultimately, I think it was just a little too insidery. I mean, we were having congressmen on, and we were talking about like the CR and the budget, and like it was very inside. And I just don't think it had a wide enough audience to keep that
Yeah.
going.
You're talking about real important things, and people get bored of that.
And how dare we? How dare we?
Okay. Oh, I'm conscious of time. Sorry. I've been wanting to ask you about Glenn for a while, and because he just
Oh, good.
still fascinates me.
I
Back in
haven't
the day.
thought about him in a while.
Uh, well, that might not. Well, yeah, bless him. So Haley right now. So we'll
Yeah,
finish on Haley, and then I got your predictions when we last talked because it was right before the midterms, and you weren't very. I don't know if I'm sure you remember. You were pretty like the Democrats are going to do well. You did
yeah,
say we'd take the House, but we got close. So we did
yeah.
do well. We definitely bucked the trends um, of momentum and did well in that election in 2022. So I want to ask how you feel in your gut 2024 is going to end up. But with Nikki Haley at the moment, because she's still in
Mhm,
the fight, it seems.
mhm, mhm,
It seems like she's still getting money. She's got her home
mhm,
state to come up, which she is behind in her home state because it is very Trumpy and she's more centrist.
mhm.
Um, A, how long do you think she can stick this out? And B, the longer she sticks in, the more Trump is going to rip her to shreds, and it's going to get bad. As you've just said, he hates a woman running against him and a strong woman, as we've seen in the E. Jean Carroll case. And we'll
Yes.
probably, hopefully, by the time this podcast goes out, we'll know that he's been hit with a huge fine for her defamation of that woman. We don't know that yet, but fingers crossed.
Mhm.
How long do you think she can last? And do you think she's going to bend the knee as well?
I don't even want to think about the latter part of your question. Um, because I'll be so disappointed if she does that. And the best thing about Nikki now is she's really coming out
Mm,
swinging against Trump. It's like she has nothing to lose. And that's how I wish
yeah.
she had done that earlier, but I'm happy she's doing it now. And she's embracing the attacks. She's selling
Mm,
t-shirts off
yeah.
of, what he's saying about her. And that's great. That's the way you do it. You've got to be brave and
Yeah.
courageous in the face of that. So that's good. I don't think this is not a traditional primary setup,
Mm,
because you'd say conventional wisdom would be, and you'll hear this on cable news everywhere, that Trump handily won Iowa, handily won New Hampshire, where she was supposed to have her best shot at it,
yep.
and so he's probably going to win. That's a true thing to say.
Yep.
However, like I said at the outset, 49% of Iowa Republican voters
Mm,
chose someone else. 42% of New Hampshire voters chose someone else. Nikki Haley doesn't have to win to stay in this race
mm,
and be the Trump alternative. And the longer she stays, the more it gives permission for voters to believe they could vote for someone other than Trump.
yeah.
The inevitability of Trump was his greatest strength coming into this primary, and
Mm,
it's why he's still getting a ton of votes, in addition to the fact that a lot of people love him. But piercing that inevitability and having an actual option in Nikki Haley
mm.
is, I'm hearing this from lots of Republican voters and moderates and independents. If she's still in, I'm going to give her my vote because I cannot vote for Trump and I cannot vote for Biden.
Right.
It's a different theory of the case this time. I don't know how long she can last. That's really up to donors. And
Hmm.
she just racked up $2 million in 48 hours just online.
Yeah.
48 hours, $2 million. That's an online donations, not, the big time
Not big,
donors who are still
not the
giving
big
her
corporate
cash.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. So campaigns end when the money runs out. If she can still make an argument that she has buyers for her brand of conservatism,
Hmm.
she can stay in past South Carolina. Now, will she? I don't know. I speak to
Yeah.
that campaign every day.
Hmm.
And I know Nikki too. But the way they are talking to me is defiant. They are
Hmm.
they are in it. I mean, they talk about Michigan, they talk about, you know, states that are coming up and contesting in those
Yeah.
states. Now, anything can happen in South Carolina is a month away. That's 1,000 years in
Yeah.
politics. So anything can happen, and I'm not going to make predictions about it. But I will use my power of persuasion to
Hmm.
say, I hope she stays in a really long time, because even weakening Trump is a benefit
Yeah. Well,
to the
and I mean,
cause.
and the Republicans traditionally have nominated the person who comes second the next cycle. I mean, Ted Cruz is is an exception to that, but previously, Mitt Romney came second,
John
McCain
McCain.
came second,
Yep.
Bob Dole came second.
Yep.
This is what they do.
Yep.
So the longer she stays in, the more she's creating a legacy. And
Correct.
I
And
mean,
she doesn't have DeSantis's calculus. Like,
yeah,
DeSantis has to go back and be governor of Florida. She doesn't have anywhere else she's got to
yeah,
go, which is her liberation, right? She can stay in as long as there's money. She can take on Trump. I don't want to think about when she gets out what she'll do. I don't want to think about that,
yeah.
because, I would
And
like to believe that she will not
yeah,
go
and
and
she can
kiss his
also
ring,
pull off heels better than Ron DeSantis can.
for sure.
So if people don't know that, Ron DeSantis apparently has a thing about his height. I don't know how tall he actually is, but his
Yeah,
boots look like
allegedly he
heels.
wears lifts in his boots.
And I'm sorry, he's from I mean, I'm sure there's some people in Florida that wear cowboy boots, but not
No,
anyway.
it's not a thing. It's really
It's
weird.
not a
It's
thing.
really weird.
I mean, no, I think, I mean, as much as, I mean, I want the Democrats to win in the next presidential election. I'm sure you would probably vote for Nikki Haley if she were the Republican nominee.
Yeah.
Um, but I would, and so like some people are saying, oh no, it's great if Trump's the one you run against. No, because if Trump is the nominee, he could win again, and that is terrifying. So even if it
Yes.
risks Biden winning again, I would rather have Nikki Haley as much as it would be great just to debate policy issues with you on that. If she ends up becoming the nominee, I will love that conversation where we can debate actual things that a
Yeah.
government would do rather
Yeah.
than overturning the government like Trump wants to, all those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do hope she stays in because I think it drives him insane. And
Which is fun,
also,
right? That's fun.
yeah, it's fun. And I mean, there has to be people within the party realizing that it can, I know we've been talking about it forever, but I think that if Trump loses big on the defamation case, which by the time this goes out, we'll probably know, I think that's another chink in the armor. I don't think that maybe, I don't know if it helps him or not, because of course it's a New York woman and all those things his base will love.
Yeah.
But it's an accumulation of stuff that, the polls showing that a lot of supporters, even in this Republican primary, would vote for Biden, but not Trump. He's weaker than it seems.
And
I
there's
hope.
this
I
other thing
hope.
out there, which I think is part of Haley's strategy too, although I've asked the campaign about this and they kind of won't say, but he could be in prison
Yeah.
in November. He could be convicted. This defamation case is civil, but
Yeah.
the other cases are federal crimes he's
Yeah.
charged with. 90 plus. He could be in prison. And I think as the legal cases go, I think people will start worrying a
Yeah.
bit about, whether this is even viable. Like, are we really going to nominate a guy from prison or a guy with felony charges? I know people say, a lot of his fans say, yeah, I'll vote for him from prison, but I
Yeah.
think the responsible folks in the Republican Party probably would rather someone else if
Yeah.
that comes to pass. So Nikki staying in is also kind of waiting for that possibility too,
Hmm.
to just be the
Be
last
there.
man or woman standing.
Yeah. I've kept you over my time. I promised. I'm sorry. I had to ask
It's
about going
okay.
back. That took. So if it is Trump the nominee right now, if you were to throw the dice on a November election result, what do you feel?
If it were today,
Yeah.
Trump would win.
Wow.
And that's because, and this is some tough love for you and Democrats, the border is a mess.
Yeah.
And that is not a messaging problem. That's an actual problem. And that's bad policy. And you're seeing this in evidence all over the country with Democratic mayors and governors coming out and saying, Joe, please fix this.
Yeah.
This is bad. This is awful for our states and cities.
Mm.
And it's not just like white anxiety that is driving the anger over the border. You have public schools in New York City. It's a very liberal, very diverse place, right? Public schools telling children, you're going to have to go learn remotely because we need to house migrants in your school during a storm.
Mm.
I mean, you can be as compassionate as you want, and I'm deeply compassionate about asylum seekers and even, just people who want to come to this country. But that is really affecting your life. And if you pay taxes in New York City, you're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
This system is broken. So if Joe Biden loses, it's because of the border, 110%. It's
Mm.
bad policy, and he's not fixing it. And Republicans are awful about it too. They're trying to punt so that they can use it
Yeah.
for political reasons. But no one's hands are clean when it comes to immigration policy. For decades, they have left it broken intentionally because it's politically profitable. But Biden's border is going to be his albatross.
Yeah.
If he loses, it will be because of that. It's not going to be the economy. It's going to be the border.
And I guess that's where we'll know in the next week or two, whether they can get legislation through, which Donald Trump is
Right.
trying to now sabotage because he knows what
Yes.
you've just said. But I think also but there's rumors. I was reading articles today where Mitch McConnell kind of saying, I don't know if I can push this through because of Trump. If
Yeah.
that's Mitch McConnell signposting that to put the blame on Trump, because I'm sure Mitch McConnell doesn't really want Trump back in the White House either.
No, but Trump is not an elected official, and the House. I mean, he might as well be the speaker because the House is
Yeah.
acting like Trump is elected, and
Yeah.
he's not. Holds no office, but he wants to use immigration because he's gross. To beat Joe Biden. So he doesn't
Yeah.
want it solved now. And what I wrote this sort of whimsical, almost crazy column a couple weeks ago saying, like, if Joe Biden wants to shake up this election,
Hmm.
he should declare a state of the emergency and close the border. This
Yeah.
will drive Republicans crazy because it will take away their biggest talking point. Democrats will want it reopened because they just want it reopened. And it will force Congress to the table, both Democrats and Republicans, to actually fix this.
Yeah.
And it will make Joe Biden look presidential, actually doing something about a crisis, which is what the president should do. I mean, that would be an awesome shakeup to
Yeah.
the current state of affairs. But, I think, again, that's very whimsical thinking.
Well, I think I would imagine, and was my thought on a similar thing, I suppose, is that if this legislation fails, then Biden is a legislator. He can point to that and say, I tried with Congress the way it's supposed to be done, the way he's done with infrastructure and other things. Trump got in the way. So now I'm going to do the executive action things that he said he couldn't do before. So he won't close the border to the extent that but he's going to take action and diffuse this because, I mean, you're right. He
I
has
don't
to.
know if that's true. I hope you're right. Just practically, I want a solution to this for
Yeah.
migrants as well. I mean,
Oh, of
this is
course. Yeah.
human rights and national security. And I mean, there are all kinds of problems around this.
Yeah.
I hope you're right. That would be great. I'm not sure that that's true. We'll see.
Well, I'm a comedian living in London, so I know a lot about
What do
this.
you know? No,
I'm
I'm kidding.
hooked. I'm hooked up. See, you know me? That's who you know. All these other people, you're talking to Nikki
You're right.
Haley. This is who you should be
I
coming
know
to.
you. Yeah.
Oh dear, yeah. Well, once again, it's so fun to talk to you, and I think to talk to people that do still have different views because I think it's the same thing. I don't want to. I love talking to liberal people, but I also want to talk to people who see well, who are on the side of democracy, which you are, and thank you for
Yes.
that. And you've not
Yes.
bended a knee, which is brilliant, but then still, inexplicably have some conservative views. But we'll work on those another time when there's not a democracy in
Okay.
crisis. When the democracy's saved, then we're going to start talking about some other issues, okay?
Okay. Trump couldn't shake my principles loose, but maybe you can.
Well, that was different. Maybe. I'm a
That was
comedian.
different.
I'm a comedian in London. You've never come up against this. This is
So
what we're
true.
talking
So
about
true.
now. But thank you so much once again. It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure. I always love this. Thank you.
So there we had it. That was Essie. Always fun to talk. We overran. I feel she's so kind with her time. I really appreciate it. And she does literally know everyone. And that's what I love about doing this podcast is talking to the people who've worked in the circles that we watch. She's been in the room with Trump, Tucker Carlson, Nikki Haley. Getting a sense of the person is what this podcast is partly all about. I don't like her predictions, but it seems like, and again, this is why I do the podcast, to find out what is the state of things. And it seems like this border crisis is real. It's not a manufactured crisis like everything else that Donald Trump says and what I think a lot of the Republican Party says, but this is cutting to the core of what's happening in the US right now. And I'm not experiencing it over here. If anything, I'm an immigrant to the UK, so they're kind of upset with me. So a fascinating conversation, an interesting decision, idea that Trump would win if the election were held today, which is just unfucking fathomable. But there we have it. That's why we have these talks. We can have a sense of what's going on. If you're enjoying the podcast, of course, give us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening. If you're watching us on YouTube, where we're posting things now, give us a like there. Subscribe wherever you're watching. Please tell people about the podcast because obviously the more people that listen, the more we can create awareness and have great conversations. And as always, if you've got someone you'd like to see us try and get on as a guest, drop me a line. Or if you have questions, you can find me on Twitter still at Erich McElroy. I'm on Threads. I'm trying to, again, up that Instagram aim. And of course, you might be watching us on YouTube as well. So thank you very much. Thank you once again to Essie Cupp, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.